Hi, everybody. Welcome back. As you know, I did a talk with the Brighton Astrology Circle, and at some point they're going to upload it, and hopefully I'll be able to download that and put it onto my channel. One of the things that came up was Saturn Neptune, and it inspired me again to look at Saturn Neptune. Because we've been talking about Uranus and Taurus and what that's going to mean for the whole global financial system shakeup. Will currencies disappear? Will Trump return it to a gold-backed dollar or gold-backed currencies? Will we have a reboot of kind of Bretton Woods? What is going to happen? I stumbled upon something really exciting that is being proposed by the Trump administration. It's called QFS. It's kind of like a digital currency, kind of like Bitcoin, but not quite. I'm going to talk about the implications for this, and then we can all ruminate on what this really means and if it will bring down the banks and bring down the global elite, because the global elite and banking are so intertwined. One goes, the other, the foundations of the other is shaken. So as you know, Uranus, the planet of change, the planet of technology, of science, Taurus, the sign of money. So we have, with all this blockchain and QFS, a mingling of money and science. But what we also have is Saturn Neptune. Now, I had a look, and in 1944 was the start of Bretton Woods, and that was when Saturn was square Neptune. At the time, Saturn was in Cancer, Neptune was in Libra. They were at a square exact at the time of Bretton Woods. In 1971, when Nixon got rid of Bretton Woods, Saturn was opposite Neptune, Saturn being in Gemini, Neptune being in Sagittarius. Now, these interactions between Saturn and Neptune in terms of the square and the opposition and the conjunction are fairly frequent. But in 2026, we have Saturn and Neptune conjunct. What will that mean? I'm going to talk about what that could mean actually in terms of money and the global financial reset. But what we also have is Neptune and Jupiter conjunct in Pisces coming up in 2022. Now, I had a look, and the last time Neptune and Jupiter were conjunct in Pisces was when the first paper money was printed in Massachusetts. So therefore, we're looking back, first time were they using paper money or printing paper money en masse in Massachusetts. Maybe we're looking now at the end of cash. That's that whole Jupiter-Neptune in Pisces cycle. So anyhow, this is what Trump says, right? The Trump administration committed to the quantum financial system, which is a national quantum coordinating, which is going to be run by the National Quantum Coordination Office. And it's part of the Strategic Vision February 2020. So this is an initiative by the Trump administration. They're going to bring in this thing called QFS, which is the quantum financial system. It's totally independent from existing centrally controlled systems. And it makes all other transfer systems like SWIFT totally defunct. It isn't crypto, but here's the key point. It is an asset-backed digital currency. Asset-backed. Asset doesn't have to be gold, but can be gold. And it's going to replace all the obsolete IP dynamic routing. And it's going to use true GPS authentication between sender and receiver. So as part of QFS, you also got CIPS, which is the cross-border interbank payment system, and AI. So what they're going to do is they'll institute the protocols of QFS so that AI is really going to be controlling all the day-to-day transfers and everything like that. And it'll be independent and it'll run the global financial network unless the highest level of approval is given. Now, that's a little bit different to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, it's all totally decentralized. There's not really a central controlling force. Maybe at the true core there is, but for this one there is going to be some sort of centralized final say that isn't AI. And the question is, whoever that is going to have control of the system, which is kind of worrying. Meanwhile, meaning it can't be totally decentralized, can it? And it can't be totally independent. So what's kind of interesting about this new financial system is that AI is going to give a digital number. I'd call that kind of a hash. You guys may know hashes from Bitcoin. It's the way Bitcoin identifies every transaction with a hash. So maybe it's going to be something like that. And so every fiat dollar, pound, euro, or yen in every bank account will have its own unique digital fingerprint, which is kind of strange because the concept of money, as we know it, is it's immutable. So £1 coin has the same value, looks the same, is indistinguishable from every pound or every dollar coin or every dollar note, every £10 note. You can't distinguish it. That makes money immutable, which means you don't know the history of that £10 note or that dollar coin you're using. But with this, if every dollar has a fingerprint. You're going to know the history of it. So if certain dollars have a dodgy past, they were stolen, they were involved in crime and corruption or drug money or something like that, then they have a tainted past. They could potentially be withdrawn from the system. I'm thinking this might be a possibility. Then they're going to monitor all these digital numbers in real time, and they're going to track the GPS locations between sender and receiver to add kind of security. What's interesting about this is they're still going to be sticking on sovereign currencies. So there's still a role for the different countries. So I see that as Trump keeping the whole nationalistic theme going. So the dollar will be the sovereign currency of the dollar in this QFS system is going to be a USN, whatever that stands for. So they basically, this whole thing is kind of predicated on something called a DLT, which is a distributed ledger decentralized database across nodes. It's sort of like Bitcoin. Anyone can become a node or a miner, and every single node or miner has access to the entire ledger or keeps a copy of the entire ledger. And therefore, it's decentralized. There's no one single body. Every time the ledger is changed or updated, when transactions happen, in other words, every node has to update. So that's what happens within Bitcoin. This is kind of similar. And it says again, all nodes in this particular QFS system are also going to maintain the ledger as they do in Bitcoin. There's no central authority. All nodes are equal. All nodes update, and all nodes verify by this consensus algorithm. That means they're kind of independent from central authorities. Because of the consensus algorithm, you can't have kind of one group of nodes, people representing those nodes, organizations kind of hijacking the system because of this consensus. But with Bitcoin, anyone can become a node, so it's totally democratic. But with this system, I believe the nodes are going to be chosen, right? So of course, it's all in the choosing of the nodes. Who will the nodes be? Because if the nodes are going to continue being people controlled by the Rothschilds, then we are never going to get out of the system of debt slavery and banking cabals that control us with such a grip. So every node verifies transactions like they do with Bitcoin, and sometimes only selected nodes can participate. That's more like a hyperledger system where you've got a closed off cryptocurrency where you choose certain nodes to do maybe sensitive stuff. But you see, who's going to choose the nodes that participate in only sort of certain sensitive things? You can see there's got to be some sort of control behind the curtain here. I don't see thorough independence as much as it can be with Bitcoin. So they go on to say a blockchain is a type of distributed ledger system, but this system that they're going to use for the QFS won't have the blocks, right? So they don't actually have to wait for transactions to upload and blocks to be added. I think that's a problem because the whole security thing with blockchain is you can't change blocks in the past without disrupting and breaking the whole chain, which adds to security. This system won't have that. So if you don't have the blocks, you don't have the security of blockchain. Also, what's the incentives for these nodes that are going to be appointed in QFS? In blockchain, the incentive is the transaction fees and that you get the block reward if you kind of solve the puzzle and get your block uploaded. And that is quite substantial, right? Obviously, it's reduced every few years. But I don't see here what the incentive is for the nodes. So if the nodes are going to be paid by someone, then the person who pays them has control. So I see some problems here. So basically, there are going to be 56 data centers in America, 192 abroad, and there'll be a cloud system controlling it all. So here's the important part. If you as an individual want to create an account, you create your security ID, your old bank account is debited of your fiat currency, and you are credited with the asset-backed funding, right? So it's a new type of money. So you'll be exchanging your fiat for a new type of money. Now, under the Austrian model of economics, they always said that the big problem we have with money at the moment is there's no competition. Basically, if you're in the UK, you have to use pounds. You might, in some circumstances, use euros or dollars. In some countries, you're allowed to use US dollars. But basically, there's no competition. Therefore, if you're in the UK, you're mainly using the pound, and therefore you're a victim of whatever your government does fiscally. And if they create havoc with the currency, like with Robert Mugabe, then your money goes to hell, right? So if there's a lot of inflation in your country, the average person has no particular way of getting away from that. So if there was competition with money, like potentially with Bitcoin could be, or with this QFS, you can move away from a fiat currency and just say, I don't want to use pounds. I want to use this digital currency, which is a much better store of value because my money is not being eroded over time because of inflation. So that could be quite good if you could choose to opt in to this QFS. So they say the money's totally under your control. And what they say is this will get rid of banks because the transactions are what they called phototonic. They have this GPS tracking for added security. And they're talking about how it'll make banks obsolete because banks won't be able to capitalize from all this transaction fees, and it'll make SWIFT obsolete. So in the context that they're talking about this QFS, it's more about money being wired all over the place and being transferred. So banks obviously capitalize a lot out of the transaction fees when that happens. So they're thinking of that will make banks obsolete. However, there's still going to be the thing of credit cards, getting funding, getting loans, getting your finance and investment banks. And I can't see how that's really going to tackle that aspect of banking. However, if this is going to be a kind of asset-backed model, then the great thing about that is you don't have central banks printing out money at interest, which causes debt slavery, because that's what they do. They put money in circulation, creating more interest than money to ever repay that interest. And that's what's caused this whole cycle of creating enormous wealth for the people who control money. So in that way, it can tackle it. But as I say, you still probably can have to use traditional banking for your credit, for getting credit. So you won't really get rid of that. The good thing they say about this is the real-time transfer. It's immediate. There's no wasting time. There's no middleman and therefore no fees. So it's just between individuals. You cut out the bank, the middleman, you cut out the fees, and you can get around the censorship. You know, you've got people who, like Laura Loomer, who's running for Congress in the same district that Mar-a-Lago is in. She's banned from Airbnb. She's banned from PayPal. She's banned from Uber. She's banned from many banks. So certain banks can shut people out politically. And if Trump goes for this, maybe it's a way of being more democratic and people getting away from that. So the important thing they say is because funds are phototonic and digital, people have sovereignty over them, and they're kind of an internationally usable currency. Now, where I think this is really important is because there are no more deposits held with a bank. You've got your digital currency. It's not held with a bank. It's independent of the country you live in. So what if they decide in your country to do a bail-in, as they did with Cyprus, when the country goes bankrupt and they dip into individual people's savings and help themselves, and they actually take your money? It's like a form of a tax or a big interest rate where they can just go into your savings if they feel that you've got over the threshold of money in your savings, and take it away. That's something we might be looking at to tackle this. Well, something governments might be looking at to tackle this wad of debt that they've got because of coronavirus. But if you're independent of the banks and you've got your money as part of this digital currency, they can't sort of dip in to your bank account via a bank and take that money away. So there, I think it could be quite good. So again, they say people have no footprint in this. People have no footprint because it's all digital footprints, right? There's no personal identities. The positive they're saying about the system is it ends corruption to do with central banking. You have choices other than fiat currency. So you have asset-backed choices. You're not dependent, your money is not dependent on the policies of one government. It replaces SWIFT transfers, and again, they say it's going to end corruption, usury, and manipulation in the banking sector, which can only be a good thing. They say banks can't profit off the fees. We covered that. It's independent from a centralized system. As I say, it's not totally independent because we've got to know who appoints these nodes, who's the ultimate authority over the nodes, and how are the nodes incentivized, because that can influence the independence of the system. It's not actually a cryptocurrency, right? It's a digital currency. And they're saying after the re-evaluation called reval, all sovereign currencies will be asset-backed, ensuring a stable value. So every country in the world can kind of opt into the system, but they have to back it up with some form of asset. They think it'll end central banking debt slavery because, as I say, printing money or issuing money at interest. They say it's 100% secure and transparent. I don't really see how it's transparent because there are no blocks, so it could potentially be corrupted at some point. Okay, and they're saying only gold or asset-backed currencies that have digital or gold asset certificates will be transferred through the QFS, so it won't be all currencies. And the asset-backed currency is also based on assets within the country of origin, and those assets can be linked to things like oil, population, productivity, and general economic statistics. A lot of subjectivity coming in there rather than just saying back it on gold, which I think is a more solid determinant. And it says their central bank fiat money will cease to be of value because it cannot be reconciled with QFS. So they're envisaging that fiat will just kind of totally go out of fashion because there'll be no incentive to hold fiat when you can hold something that's of perceivable greater value, right? And they again say that fiat currency can't be legal under QFS because it cannot be designated as clean. So could this all lead to what they're calling a global currency reset? Yes, we think astrologically it's going to, because of the tie-in now with the beginning of Bretton Woods, the end of Bretton Woods, and also with Uranus and Taurus. It seems highly likely, definitely given the state of affairs that we're in with fiat currencies, and given that of the thousands of fiat currencies that have existed since the start of money, every one of them has gone to nothing. It's part of the life cycle of fiat money. So it's living on borrowed time. This really has to happen. So there will be a specific formula to establish the link between a country's currency and gold, and the formula will give a fair value of each country's comparative assets from economy, population, etc. And another thing they're talking about is GWD, global wealth distribution, which will be based on commerce and sovereignty. The key here is this maintains a certain amount of sovereignty because the value of your QFS that you're going for is linked to the performance of your country and the wealth of your country as a whole. So again, this steers it a little bit away from globalism. So is this a way that Donald Trump is going to kind of buy into the whole digital currency thing? The way he's going to maintain the independence or the sovereignty of nations or the integrity of nations and different currencies? Is it a way he's going to tackle the banks? And as some people postulated, is this the way he's going to take us to some sort of gold-backed currency system just before the collapse of the dollar to prevent the turmoil that would be caused by the collapse of the dollar? And is this some sort of pushback against China, who are also developing various crypto and digital currencies? So I don't have all the answers to this, but I found this very interesting, wanted to put it in the astrological context and just to put it out to you guys to say, what do you think of this? Does this sound good? Because I know Max Eigen introduced it. He thought, he wasn't too sure. Maybe he thought 10% good, 90% could be bad. I think it's a very positive move, but I think it all depends who's got the ultimate gear lever, the ultimate remote control at the top here and control over the nodes. It depends how it's set up. If it's set up by the usual suspects, then yeah, it'll just take us in the same direction. But it's certainly a fantastic initiative. It's certainly good for upholding America as the prop to hold up the whole of Western civilization and capitalism. So let's keep an open mind on it. It's certainly, we need a reset. There's going to be one. It's inevitable. So at least let's get out ahead of it. And I feel that Donald Trump is kind of getting out ahead of it. See what you think, guys.